I'd like to talk to you about Christian Ladd Hall, a fun-loving and spontaneous kid whose family nicknamed him the Sunshine Boy. An Eagle Scout, football player, wrestler, an avid reader and friend to his dog Banjo. He's the last person you might think would be affected by a mental health disorder. In his case, bipolar disorder 2. Christian passed away in July 2022 at the age of 27. To honor his memory and support future generations of mental health professionals, people who can help individuals like Christian, Psychi recently launched the new Christian Ladd Hall Scholarship for Mental Health Advocacy, our topic for today. Hello there, this is Bradley, and you're listening to a bonus episode of Psych Everywhere, a podcast by Psychi, the International Honor Society in Psychology. For this show, distinguished guests weigh in on applying psychological science to a diverse range of current events and to better your life. As always, if you would prefer to read along as you listen, a written transcript is available. See the link in the show notes for this episode. Today we're going to do things a little differently. Joining me is Dr. Shawn Charlton from the University of Central Arkansas. Shawn is Psychi's president-elect and also a personal friend of Christian and his family. I've known Shawn for a number of years now as I've gotten to work with him on his Psychology in the Headlines series for Psychi. And so when I heard about this scholarship fundraising that he's working on, it's been increasingly on my mind the question, how could I help to support this? I decided that bringing Shawn on the show and sharing a little about Christian's story would be a good place to start. Hi Shawn, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Bradley.
So my first question today is, could you share a little of the kind of behind-the-scenes story of how the scholarship came to be?
Yes, it's one of those stories about timing. Christian passed away last July, and he'd been such a close friend of the family. And I was pondering and thinking, what do we do to honor this family and to honor Christian's memory? And that happened to coincide right together with the time when I was coming back onto the board as the president-elect. I'd been a vice president a few years ago and then was off the board for a little bit and was coming back. And so on my mind was Christian's passing and what we could do to honor him. And I got into the board meeting. We started talking about the Prosser Scholarship for Women of Color and the success with the fundraising there. And the conversation kind of switched over to, we've been successful here, let's keep the momentum. And where do we keep that going? And that was kind of one of those ding, ding, ding moments. And I was like, but wait a minute, here's a chance to be able to honor Christian and address a topic that is, to me and in my family, just so incredibly important. Because, Christian really brings things to light with how his story ends. But if we look back on my family history, if we look back in my history, and we go back, mental health challenges have been just a part of what our story and our family looks like. My dad was a clinical psychologist, but it's just been part of our kind of theme throughout my life and something that my wife Vita and I wanted to do something about. So we're sitting in that board meeting with this opportunity now for Psychi to look forward to what we support as our next scholarship, with a family to honor, and with my passion for supporting mental health advocacy and mental health outreach. And they just kind of all three came together at just the right time, and what I think is just in a very beautiful way.
So what does the scholarship mean for you and for people who either have or know someone who has bipolar disorder?
I think one piece is, really anything we can do to not just kind of engage in the conversation, but to show a priority to the conversation. And so I think the scholarship has that value of really being able to say, this is something that is meaningful beyond lip service. It's meaningful for us to put effort and work into. So there's that piece I think has value. The direct value is something we're doing with this scholarship that's different from some of our other Psychi scholarships. is it still has the $3,000 to go towards educational expenses, but also once the scholarship's funded, there'll be the potential of $1,000 for the recipient to put on a community mental health advocacy event. So it might be bringing in a speaker, or might give some support for doing a mental health fair. But I really love that just built into the scholarship is the idea your education is, yes, something we want to support, but we also want to support your getting involved and engaged in the conversation.
I wondered, what is the goal exactly that we're trying to reach with this scholarship? Is it 100,000 again, like it was for the recent Prosser scholarship?
Yes. So our objective on this is to become a fully endowed scholarship. And so that requires us to be able to fundraise up that $100,000.
Yeah, I remember with the Prosser scholarship for women of color that they actually had I think it was a 10-year timeline. And fortunately, they were able to raise the money in, I think, only 3 or 4 years. So hopefully this scholarship will be able to follow in that same path as that. Do you have any idea how much has been raised so far?
So we are hoping to follow that same timeline. As of right now, we're just over $6,800.
Wow. Okay. I mean, as far as I know, we had just started talking about it. So that's awesome.
It's great. Yeah. So we just started, I think in January, really is where we started talking about the scholarship. And then our chapter here at the University of Central Arkansas, we just did a PIA Psych Professor fundraiser for the scholarship. And students loved it, and all the donations came in. We had a group of professors who had agreed to potentially get a PI. And whichever professor received the most donations in their name got the pie in their face. We also put in there a rule that if professors were tied, everybody who was tied would get the pie. So at the end of the day, we had 3 professors who all received the same amount of donations, and all 3 very sportingly took and received their pie in their face. And it was just very successful. It was fun for our chapter. It was fun for our faculty up until the last kind of moments of it. And it was extremely successful in fundraising for the scholarship. So we're very happy with the support from alums and from students and from our UCA community towards helping with fundraising for this.
Cool. Yeah, I had heard that you did some kind of an activity at your chapter, and so I was going to ask you today what that was.
Yeah, I'll send you the YouTube links for it.
Ooh, you've got video. Yeah, share that. I'd love to share that on social media, and we can maybe put a link to it in the show notes for this episode. Cool.
We do have videos, yeah.
And how do you envision this scholarship making a positive impact on the mental health field and society as a whole?
When we were designing it and we were thinking about what we wanted the scholarship to look like, a big part of our conversation was, again, how do we make this bigger than just the scholarship? Because it's beautiful and wonderful to be able to support one student, but the mental health conversation is so much bigger than that. And so we have the 3 things built in the scholarship. 1, the money that goes to the student to support their education. 2, what we talked about before, that $1,000 availability for them to put on a mental health advocacy program. And then the third thing that's built into the scholarship, as part of their submission for the scholarship, we're asking the applicants to submit it's either a 500 or 1,000-word essay on mental health advocacy. And our hope is that those essays can become something that would potentially go in the eye, or that we could put on the website. But they increase the number of voices that we hear and what those conversations are. Because with the applicants, if we get 5 to 10 applicants a year, that's 5 or 10 essays that are just well-written, interesting essays about mental health advocacy. And then we have the student who we support, and then we have the community program. So those are kind of the formal pieces that we hope will build that impact for the scholarship. And then thinking about those compounding year over year from recipient to recipient. But even bigger than that, and I don't know if bigger is the right word, but maybe even broader than that, is what it does to, again, encouraging this being a conversation. If we take and we think about the Prosser, one of the things I saw when we started talking about the Prosser was a lot of people started saying, well, who was Prosser? What was the story here? And then that raised out to having more conversations about the impact of women of color throughout the history of psychology, and builds that. As that conversation builds, then people start thinking about, if this is what happened, what else is possible? And I hope we can see the same thing with this scholarship, that as we talk about it, as we mentioned Christian Ladd Hall, that brings up a conversation, and it invites people to ask, well, what is it about mental health advocacy? And then we can share and we can have those conversations. And one thing I talk to my students about is every conversation is normalizing. That every time we can stop and we can talk about mental health challenges, about mental health successes, about mental health support, that just creates that feel from individuals and within communities that, yes, these are things we can talk about, and yes, these are things that we can address. So there's the formal pieces, but there's also just, this creates a conversation point and creates a place for us to be able to really show, again, our interest in it, but then also for Psychi to be able to show the value of investing in mental health advocacy.
Okay, my last question is this. In addition to a financial gift, what are some ways that people can help to promote and support the scholarship?
Yeah, so of course we love financial gifts. Let's make sure we put that one out there, and that's helpful. But one of the things I think is the best part of being able to help promote the scholarship is, if you look on a lot of the stuff we have on Psychi, I think it's on the website right now, but we've shared on a flyer that we put together for the scholarship 5 ways to be a mental health advocate, or just 5 ways to integrate that into your life. And the first one is to learn about mental health. The second is to take the time to hear what others are saying and what they're experiencing. The third one is to share your support and share kind of your role as an advocate. Fourth is to engage in the conversation. And then fifth is to do your part to create that community of support. And to me, I think when you're really focused on doing those pieces, becoming an active advocate for mental health, and if the scholarship is the way to get in and have those conversations, I think that's a beautiful way to support it. And just wonderful to be able to go in and let this be your conversation starter in talking with your institutions, talking with family, talking with friends. But it gives a way to be able to get in and start into conversations that sometimes can be hard, and sometimes can be ones that we kind of push off getting into. But being able to take and say, hey, did you know Psychi is doing this scholarship for mental health advocacy? Right there, that supports the scholarship and that it mentions it, but it also gives us a way to start a conversation.
Is this flyer the same one that was passed around at the regional conventions?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode so that if anyone wanted to share it, they could. And of course, I'm going to put a link to the scholarship donation page as well. I think that goes without saying.
Awesome.
Well, Shawn, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think just in that conclusion again, that, we obviously love the support for the scholarship, and we were excited by how quickly Psychi jumped in. But for me, even more, I just love the support that we're getting more and more in the community, being able to talk about mental health and being able to recognize, that when we talk about mental health, we don't always mean mental distress. We can also mean mental support. We can mean mental thriving, mental success. But it's just so important to be able to share that and talk about it. So, Bradley, I'll thank you right now for giving me this chance to come on and talk about not only the scholarship, but also just the importance of being a mental health advocate and the importance of being vocal and being supportive and listening within your community to the needs of individuals and oftentimes of yourself within your life, within what's going on. So thank you, Bradley.
Well, I was happy to help, and I certainly appreciate everything that you're doing as well. Thank you for listening to this bonus episode of Psych Everywhere. A link to the scholarship webpage is included in the show notes for this episode. Please take a moment to visit that page and make a donation as you're able. Psych High has been working really hard this past year or so to increase our mental health support, and that includes a new mental health awareness online resource, which shares educational content and ways to take action in crisis hotlines. I'll put a link to that also in the show notes for this episode. And we also have a video contest going on right now, which asks members to share a 2 to 3 minute video about what mental health support means to you. We at Psych High headquarters are very much honored to be able to facilitate this scholarship honoring Christian, and we can't wait to begin awarding those first recipients. In the meantime, please stay tuned to Psych Everywhere. For our next episode, we've got a special conversation all about bipolar disorder, what it's like, treatment options, and hope for the future. Okay, that's all for now. I'll connect with you again soon. Copyright 2023, Psych High, the International Honor Society in Psychology. All rights reserved.